This is CBC Here and Now.
I offer my apologies to the House, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable, the Member for Humber, Bay of Islands.
I apologize.
Well, it wasn't a very apologetic apology.
I just came out of a caucus room, and I will tell you that, people are smiling. They're talking to each other again.
Apologies months in the making.
Dale Kirby and Eddie Joyce say they are sorry inside the House of Assembly.
Good evening and welcome to Here and Now. I'm Debbie Cooper.
And I'm Anthony Germain.
2 apologies, but not many words. MHA's Dale Kirby and Eddie Joyce say a short sorry after a long harassment investigation.
And those apologies came after last night's debate, some of which got particularly personal and heated. Here Now's Katie Breen joins us live. Katie, you were there for all of that, and you were there again today. How did it all go?
Well, the apologies came, but their sincerity has been questioned. Take a listen.
The Honourable, the Member for Mount Sion.
I offer my apologies to the House, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable, the Member for Humber, Bay of Islands.
I apologize.
Joyce's sorry was so fast, the camera team doing the feed at the House of Assembly weren't able to adjust their cameras in time to actually see him apologizing. But he was on camera when he was defending himself, a lot of which got heated. At one point, he said he felt like this was a lynching. He also implied he was protecting the Premier.
I wasn't sure what he meant by that, but I thought what he said was it was information that he would have put forward that probably would have put me in a compromised situation, and so he kept it. So he kept that information to himself.
Now, Katie, what information does Joyce have?
Well, the Premier says Joyce implied he had text messages, but Ball says he hasn't seen evidence himself. He has no idea what these messages could include, but he says threats of blackmail aren't fazing him.
Don't affect my ability to lead. It's, I just do what I got to do for people of this province, and I'm committed to that.
I wasn't able to get a hold of Joyce today to ask him about the threat or about the sincerity of his apology. I wasn't able to get a hold of Kirby either. They both quickly left the House of Assembly after question period. Now, Pam Parsons, one of the people who accused Kirby, she changed her mind and decided not to do an interview, but we did speak with Sherry Gambin-Walsh last night. And Debbie, you were going to bring us those comments now.
Thanks very much, Katie. And let's take you back to last night. The debates over the harassment reports dragged on for hours as both accusers and the accused gave charged statements before Joyce apologized.
Merciful Redeemer, pray for us. Mr. Speaker, that daily prayer, along with the support of good people, province and nationwide, is what helped me survive this horrendous ordeal, which will go down in history as the harassment scandal.
I'm now going to take the people of Newfoundland and Labrador on a journey.
A false statement went all across the province. It victimized me because it said that I put the names out there, which I didn't do.
He wanted me to hire someone who was not qualified. I was upset. I didn't want my husband, my daughter, and my son to see me, so I went into the bedroom. My son is an individual with autism. When I get upset, he gets upset, and I could not let him see me.
And I always said, one thing, Mr. Speaker, sometimes when you say it, it don't mean it's true.
I would now ask that the Member for Humber, Bay of Islands stand in his place in this House of Assembly and apologize to this Assembly for the failure and violation as cited by the report of the Commissioner for Legislative Standards as of October 18th, 2018. The Honourable, the Member for Humber, Bay of Islands.
I apologize.
What did you think of Joyce's apology?
Well, it wasn't a very apologetic apology. He did do it because as he indicated, that he honors the House, and therefore he did it. He was asked to do it. It's unfortunate, I don't think he's sorry, but he did apologize.
It's a frustrating time for everyone, and it's not going to. The apology in itself is what, I guess, the reprimand that had been put forward in the resolution, but that does not mean that it changes, any decisions that I will make. So I'm going to take the necessary time, and I've not spoken to Mr. Joyce in quite some time, or Mr. Kirby in quite some time. So it's a time now to absorb all the information that came out today. I saw a lot of frustration about the process, and we all know that it needs to be changed, and it will be changed. And I'll be making some suggestions and making my points very clear to the Privilege and Elections Committee, but also to members of the House.
Well, now that Joyce and Kirby have apologized, they must take respect in the workplace training. And I asked the Premier today how he's going to know if that training is working.
None of us are perfect. We all make mistakes. And so therefore, as we continue to be trained and educated on what's new and relevant to the workforces, and this environment is very different.
Doesn't there have to be a will there? I mean, it's like these two guys have been voluntold, go to training. Like, there has to be an acceptance that you need the training. And to be blunt, it doesn't strike me as though either one of these guys think they need that kind of training.
And I think yesterday, if you, those that were listening to what I said, I talked about a restorative justice program. And I even said in my comments, if you remember, I said in my comments yesterday that, these are not the exact words I used yesterday, but it can't be words of convenience. They had to mean something, and those words must be demonstrated by actions. And only when those that come forward with allegations feel comfortable in the situation in a restorative system can you actually have the outcome that we want.
Thousands of documents, photos, and letters chronicling World War I are stored here at Memorial University. It's a treasure trove for a researcher like Jenny Higgins.
Well, this morning I wanted to put out bags of leaves that I raked, and I realized they would dissolve in the rain that was smacking the Avalon.
Yeah.
It was so wet this morning.
But I also heard, sorry Ashley, I also heard people talking about how warm it was, which you predicted last night.
I did. Warm, very warm temperatures. If you take a look at what we saw earlier today, high of 16 degrees here in St. John's. We're about 1.5 degrees away from the record from 1959. And then we've got similar temperatures right across the island. 12 degrees was the high in Corner Brook this afternoon. And windy as well for the Rec House area. Saw a gust earlier today at 126 kilometers per hour. The warning has ended. The winds have died down. And we are seeing that rain across the island move off. The heaviest rain has pushed off shore. We are still looking at the slight chance of a few showers tonight for the Avalon. Otherwise, more rain on the way for the west coast. But I'll have all those details coming up in a little bit.
We have more tonight from our powerful interview with Lori Chaffee. She's the nurse who was working at the medical clinic in De Gras on the Port-au-Port Peninsula 6.5 years ago when a co-worker was shot and killed just meters from her. Until now, Chaffee has never talked publicly about what happened that day when Stephanie Chasson was murdered by her estranged husband, who then killed himself inside the clinic. But now she is sharing her story so people better understand the problem of violence in the workplace. Here's part of her conversation with Fred Hutton of the St. John's Morning Show.
Lunch was coming to an end. There was snow on the ground. Stephanie was going to open the door to allow our next patients to come in for the afternoon. I heard a loud noise, a bang, and I stopped for a minute and I looked out the door. And I could see Stephanie lying on the floor in front of where my doorway was to my office, not moving. And I saw a shotgun or a rifle, I think it was a rifle actually, that was pointed over her. And I realized that she had been shot. I snuck back into the door, I tried to close the door. It had no latch onto it, no way of locking the door. So I closed it as best I could, and I crept down into a corner because I knew that the person that was there knew that I was there because he had passed us on the way to work that morning. And Stephanie had made reference that she had passed him. And so I was scared, afraid that I was probably going to die myself. And I could hear him roaming around the clinic, yelling and screaming at her. And I heard him load the gun second time and shot out again. And I could still hear him pacing around the clinic, yelling. And then I heard him reload the gun And I was strategically trying to think what I could do to survive if he come into where the bathroom was. And so I was crouched down thinking that if he come through the door, I could push him away. I had no other way out. There was no windows, no doors in the lower part of the clinic. But there was a door across the hall just adjacent that if I could get through there, I could get upstairs and get outside through a condemned stairwell that was part of the clinic. Anyway, I heard the third shot ring out, and I heard a groan from him, and I realized that he must have shot himself. So I looked out and I could see the boots, because it was a very small area, probably no further distance than, like I said, 5 or 7 feet away from me. So I took a chance to run for help for Stephanie. And I ran out across and up over stairs. I ran to the school next door, little children, called the police to come, called the hospital. The ambulance was there and we couldn't go in because we had to have the police, which was an hour away from Stephenville, to arrive before we could go in and see if she was okay.
So why speak out now? Why tell this story now about Stephanie and your own experience as a nurse?
To show others psychological support, and I think we're seeing a more violence in our society, and that it's happening more and more. I was told it would never happen again. It was the likelihood, and I think a year later, I heard on the news in Conception Bay South that there was another shooting in a clinic. So it can happen, and it could happen again tomorrow. And I guess by speaking out, my hope is that it might, if it saves another life, 1 life, 200, then it's worth it. It was time for me to speak out, to let people know, you know, we need safer work environments, we need legislation around domestic violence, because it can come to you in the workplace. You could be working with someone that you really don't know or understand what's happening in their life behind the scenes. You work side by side with them every day, you probably know everything about them, but these are things that people don't reveal. It'll be with me my entire life, it'll never go away. I found a place to put it, and I refuse to allow an individual who controls somebody else to control my family's life and to interrupt my family. I have my own family, and that was important to me. I didn't want him to continue to control another life.
In other news, Brandon Phillips has added another year to his life sentence. The 30-year-old has pleaded guilty to drug possession. Phillips shot and killed bar patron Larry Wellman during an attempted robbery at the Captain's Quarters Hotel 3 years ago. This, while waiting for trial, I should mention, for Wellman's death, prison guards caught Phillips hiding a package of drugs. It was a package that he picked up near a prison fence on the grounds of Her Majesty's Penitentiary. Among those drugs, heroin and fentanyl. He also had marijuana, but that charge was dropped.
Well, Anthony, just in time for pre-season, Satnam Singh has finally touched down in St. John's.
Yeah, a hard man to miss, to say the least. The St. John's Edge signed the 7'2" basketball star to this year's roster. He left his hometown in rural India at age 14 to pursue a basketball scholarship in Florida before becoming the first Indian-born player drafted by the NBA.
But visa complications delayed his arrival in Canada. The player took to Twitter last month, even reaching out to the Prime Minister of India to help push the process along.
It's been very well, and it's been very great for all my fans and St. John's. And it's really a new team, new players, and new teammates. And I saw the draft. I saw some players, the videos, and they play really well. And I hope I will be comfortable very soon with them. I know I'm really late for that, but I hope I see everyone.
Was that Ariana Kellen there? She looked like a ventriloquist toy. Now, he's on his way to Grand Falls, Windsor to meet the team, and well, they better send a stretch limo for this guy.
Tomorrow night, the Edge play an exhibition game at Exploits Valley High at 6 o'clock. Tickets for that game, they sold out in 30 minutes.
I get so mad when I see people driving with no helmet on, because I'm like, look at the risk you're taking, like, I'm your example.
How one young woman's life changed in an instant. I'm Jen White, and I'll have that story for you as part of CBC's Fatal Fun, our series on ATV safety, coming up.
Weather update is brought to you by Harvey's Home Heating. Complete furnace replacement if yours cannot be repaired. That's furnace freedom. Visit harveyshomeheating.ca for more.
Welcome back once again, Ashley. I'm having a sneak look over at your map there, and temperature is still pretty warm in St. John's, but it is coming down a little bit.
Yeah. It's starting to come down. We're seeing about a 4-degree drop right now, sitting at about 12 degrees in St. John's. Those temperatures across the western part of the island have also dropped down to about 9 degrees in Corner Brook, and those temperatures still just above zero in Lab City at 1 degree. We're seeing things change over to showers today as well, same through Happy Valley Goose Bay. But if we take a look at the satellite radar, we're seeing some more showers move through the southern half of or the southwestern portion of the island, and then most of that rain has moved off for the Avalon, and we're going to see that cloud cover continue to track a little bit further east through the night tonight. But again, that risk of showers is expected across the western part of the island. And then flurries for most of Labrador tonight. Now, like I said, it did change over to rain and still is seeing rain, but for Lab City and Happy Valley Goose Bay, that should change back over to flurries as the temperature drops in behind this system. Into tomorrow, generally looking at a mix of sun and cloud through most of the island. Slight chance we could see some showers through central, and then parts of Burin as well, tracking towards the Avalon into the afternoon. Just a slight chance of showers though. But through the overnight, temperatures dropping a couple more degrees as we head through the night tonight, down to the single digits. Again, showers along the west coast, some southwest winds 20 gusting 40 through the night tonight, and then winds picking up for the eastern portions of the island as well, 40 gusting 60 through the night tonight, and then another 2 to 4 centimeters for Lab City, mixing more with rain. Most of that snow will fall from Makovic to Nain tonight. We could pick up about 5 to 10 centimeters by tomorrow morning, and then more snow on the way into the afternoon tomorrow, bringing accumulations close to 20 centimeters for those areas, and temperatures tomorrow sitting between 1 and 2 degrees. Now, later on in the day, we are looking at that risk of some freezing rain as well. Could see that later on in the afternoon for Nain, more of a rain-snow mix as well. And then the winds really picking up across the island tomorrow. Port aux Basques could see winds gusting upwards of about 80 kilometers per hour. Most of the island going to see about 50 to 70 kilometer per hour gusts, but the sun peeking out into the afternoon. Again, slight chance of a few showers down through Burin, 8 degrees in Marystown, 9 in St. John, so a little bit cooler than we're seeing today. That is around seasonal for this time of year. And then up through Grand Falls, Windsor, 7 degrees. St. Anthony 5. The Straits looking at mainly showers, but then upper along the west coast, rather into around Grossmoor, could see 5, maybe even 10 centimeters of snow through the afternoon tomorrow. Otherwise, that will be showers down at the surface. And then 2 degrees for Cartwright, looking at a mix of rain and snow, and then eventually changing over to snow later on in the day. So that's a look at your tomorrow forecast. When I come back, we'll look a little bit ahead. It looks windy this weekend. I'll have all those details coming up. Karen.
Tonight on CBC Investigates, we continue our special Atlantic-wide coverage of deaths involving all-terrain vehicles and snowmobiles. And we have some news from this province. Service NL Minister Sherry Gambin-Walsh told CBC News that the Child Death Review Committee recently recommended there should be a full review of the Act and regulations for these machines. She says government has been working on legislation for the past year. The changes include raising the minimum age for snowmobile operators. Right now, you can ride one at the age of 13. The government wants it to be higher. And making helmets mandatory for snowmobilers. Gambin-Walsh says the legislation is being prepared for the spring sitting of the House of Assembly. And now we bring you the story of an ATV crash survivor that's close to home. Tanya Pender was just 15 when she was involved in an accident that left her with a lifelong brain injury. Now the Paradise woman is warning others about the importance of ATV safety. Here now's Jen White has more.
Tove, hi baby boy.
You've come so far from, say, being in that hospital bed to where you are today. Did it take a lot to get through that?
It did. It took a lot of time, and I'm just thankful to where I am today. That's what I feel like I'm a miracle.
12 years ago, on a Sunday afternoon in October, 15-year-old Tanya Pender went out on an ATV with a friend in a gravel pit in Paradise. The police markings show where they lost control and crashed into a piece of equipment.
If she had to be wearing her helmet, she would have been home that evening with a broken wrist. But of course, that split second, she made a drastic decision.
People told me the reason why I never wore a helmet is because I didn't want to mess up my hair. And that was bad. I wish I could turn back time and put that helmet on.
Pender was brought to hospital in critical condition. She went into a coma for 11 days. After she woke up, she had to start from scratch with sessions of physio and speech therapy.
I had to learn words and letters, numbers, the way I move my tongue.
So it was really the whole thing then. So it was, I mean, your body movements, your walking, your talking.
Just like a little baby.
About 2 years ago, specialists told Pender she had reached a peak in her recovery.
They said, you're gonna be as good as you are now. There's no changing. I'm determined, but I guess I'm used to myself now. I know that I can't get better, so I can't do it.
Pender says there are other lasting effects from the accident too. She sometimes gets tremors in her hands, and she gets pain on the left side of her head where she struck it.
It feels like it's bleeding inside. I don't know how, but that's what it feels like.
Pender also looks on the bright side. She says she feels special because now she can use both of her hands for certain tasks.
I can do my makeup and everything with my left hand. When it comes to writing and eating, I can only use my right hand because I was right-handed before the accident. But it takes me a long time to write, a very long time. I do feel like a little bit judged. I'm afraid to go out and socialize with people because the way I talk and my balance is not good. But yeah, I don't know.
But you're here.
Yeah, I'm thankful for that. Yes, I'm here.
What would you say to some of those people who are maybe being a bit reckless on these machines?
Well, I would say look what happened to me. I'm your example. Do you want to go through what I went through? It's a hard situation, but yeah, it could happen to anyone.
Pender and her family have a message. They would like to see all ATV users wear helmets, but they would also like to see the regulations changed here in Newfoundland and Labrador so that ATV drivers would have to be 18 instead of 16 years old. Jen White, CBC News, Paradise.
The Muskrat Falls inquiry heard from a member of the hydroelectric project's management team for the very first time today. Jason Keane was the deputy project manager in 2010, and he testified that during his time there, the project's appetite for risk increased. Risk is measured with what's called a P number, and this can get a bit complicated, but here's how it works. The higher the number, the lower the risk of cost overruns. So Keane says the project team began developing the project using a P75 value, but they were later told to use a riskier P50 number. And that meant the Muskrat Falls estimate given to the public could remain at $6.2 billion, of course, but the risk of cost overruns was high. And Keane testified about why the P50 number was used.
At Decision Gate 2, there had been a push to remove it during negotiations with Emera with the intent to reconsider it at Decision Gate 3. This, however, did not occur due to the desire of Nalcor executive to maintain the estimate at $6.2 billion.
Who specifically would you be referring to there?
That would be the executive team.
Okay, so can you give us names, give the commissioner names?
Okay, I guess it would be principally Mr. Bennett and Mr. Martin.
When Thomas and I first met, he had never spoken of the war. And after all these years, he still hasn't.
Well, tonight, a musical take on the life of Father Thomas Nangle, the St. John's man who campaigned for monuments and the famous Caribou Trail.
We join Joe Gowdy on his annual paddle down Labrador's Churchill River, an archival special at a special time, Sunday at 2 and Monday at 7.
Well, more on the First World War now, but slightly different. Tonight, art and music blend the history of a famous priest who not only served with the young soldiers, but who also led efforts after the war to build memorials to honor them. Ours is the title of a musical theatre production about Father Thomas Nangle, chaplain of the Royal Newfoundland Regiment, and the men, women, and children of the era. So let me take you on a sneak peek of this spectacular show that opens Friday at the St. John's Arts and Culture Centre.
When Thomas and I first met, he had never spoken of the war. And after all these years, he still hasn't. It's been 25 years since he left his country of Newfoundland. He says it's because it's the only place he could find where there weren't any Catholics. But I know it runs much deeper than that. I know Rhodesia is his home now, and it's the only place he can find where he's not haunted by the memories of his friends and comrades that he left behind on the battlefields of France, many of whom he found and buried, and many of whom he didn't. And even though he doesn't speak of it, I know he's haunted. But we try our best to move on, and although we will never return to Newfoundland, we will always remember.
While I applaud the valor of the young men who have gone and they've given their all, they have volunteered, they've left their families, they've left their homes for our safety, for our freedom, for the future of this country. Father Nangle has a job here to take care of his people. And this has been a constant struggle between us. And he has tried my patience for the last 2 years, constantly asking me to go. And how many times can I say no? I'm at my wit's end. And now the governor has decided that he wants to send a Newfoundland chaplain, and my hands are tied. I have no choice but to give Nangle his freedom and let him serve.
I hope ours stands as a memorial to all the people who lost their lives in World War I and all the veterans that have served this country so honorably. Beaumont Hamel left a scar upon the nation of Newfoundland that we have never recovered from, and it's important to remember the souls who died for this country in a way that art can only serve.
Ours premieres this Friday, November 9th at 7:30 p.m. at the Arts and Culture Centre in St. John's. Second show on Sunday. Tickets, $65, $30 for students. And for military veterans, you are invited to attend free of charge. All you have to do is get in touch with Opera on the Avalon to get your Veterans VIP pass.
Wednesday, August 18th. 1915. Mother, we fellows are happy and glad that we are going to do our little bit for our king and country, and I hope that when we get in action with those Turks, that we will make a good name for ourselves and for the good old place we came from, Newfoundland. Lord Kitchener on Thursday told us that he was well pleased with us, and that we were a healthy crowd of fellows, and further, that he was proud of us, and we were going to the Dardanelles this week. This is Wednesday, and tomorrow night we will be leaving. The king inspected us yesterday. Just a guard of honor it was. 100 of us were picked out of the battalion to represent it, and I was one of the 100. So you see, your son was a guard of honor for the king, to represent the battalion and to represent the good old place we came from. Mother, cheer up and be brave, for your soldier boy will return before long. Pray to God that he will spare you till I come home. And if it is not my luck to come through this world's war safe, well, I can say I am willing to go under, like a good many brave soldiers have gone. Someday I will meet you in heaven, but I trust in God to come through safe and return home again. We are fitted out with everything that soldiers require, and are short of nothing. Remember me to my friends. Tell them that I am glad I am going to the front, and I am as happy as the flowers of May. Goodbye, and God bless you, and spare you till I come home. Private Lawrence Burns.
Thousands of documents, photos, and letters chronicling World War I are stored here at Memorial University. They are a treasure trove for a researcher like Jenny Higgins. Her reflections just ahead. In the lead up to Remembrance Day, many people are reflecting on the huge social and economic impact of the First World War on this province, as well as the human connections. Those human connections still inspire, like these bronze castings of descendants of Newfoundlanders killed in the war, the latest work from sculptor Morgan MacDonald. Jenny Higgins is with Memorial's Maritime History Archive. She's done extensive research on the Great War and authored the award-winning book Newfoundland in the First World War. What is it that intrigued you about this period in the province's history?
For me, it would have to be stories about the people. One day while I was researching, I came across a letter written by a mother to her son who was serving in Beaumont-Hamel, and it just drew me in, so I had to keep digging.
Talk to me about how so much loss of people in the World War affected the province.
There was a lot of mourning after the First World War. I think the best way for me to understand how it impacted the society is to look at individuals. One person I thought would be nice to talk about today is this soldier, John Fitzgerald. He was in the ambulance unit of the Newfoundland Regiment, and he died on the battlefield at Gallipoli, binding another man's wounds. So you can imagine the sorrow that his family encountered. Now, while they're dealing with mourning the loss of their son, they also have to apply to the government for separation allowance. This is the money that the government gave to the dependents of soldiers who died at war. So John's mother was his dependent. She's a widow, so she applied to the government for the separation allowance. The government turned her down because she had another son of military age. He was living in Pittsburgh, but they wrote her a letter saying, we cannot give you the separation allowance because the rule is if you have a son of military age who did not enlist, you're not eligible for separation allowance.
This is only one story, Jenny, isn't it? There were many like that, devastating for not only personally for a mother, but also for the communities.
The death of a single man could have widespread impacts on a single community, especially these small communities in Newfoundland, and especially if the soldier who was killed was, say, an officer, someone from the social or economic elite. An example of that would have happened to a community called 3 Arms in Green Bay. Its central industry was a cannery. The heir to that industry was a young man named Stephen Morris who served overseas, and he was also killed in the First World War. So that left the cannery, the major employer in 3 Arms, without an heir. So when Stephen's father died, I think in the 1920s, 1924, the cannery closed. And it was a devastating blow to the community. By the 1940s, I think only 2 families lived there. In the 1950s, no one was there.
So there was a human toll taken, this war on families here. There was an economic and social change was brought about.
Yes, this is one of my favorite stories from the war. It's a positive story. I always love it. I deal with so much sadness studying the war, so it's nice when you can talk about positive social change that happened as a result of the war, and I'm talking about women's suffrage, which is a story I love. So the First World War, it had 2 effects on suffrage. One, it delayed the suffrage movement, which was gaining ground in the early 1900s. But then when the war broke out, all of the suffragists refocused their energy into the war movement. So a lot of the women, they would serve overseas as nurses, and thousands of women in Newfoundland from all across the island came together to form the Women's Patriotic Association. So they're knitting the iconic Newfoundland sock that found its way onto the feet of many soldiers serving overseas. They raised thousands and thousands of dollars, which were used to open a hospital on Waterford Bridge Road, to put beds in hospital wards overseas, to send medical supplies overseas, and eventually there's a dollar figure put on it, about $500,000, which at the time was an enormous sum. So the government praises women's work during the war, the press praises it, and the suffragists turn it into a very clever argument. They say, we have demonstrated that women's traditional work makes a tremendous contribution to society. Shouldn't we have a say in the governance of that society we're contributing to? There were editorials printed calling for, that women should have the right to vote. There was a change in public opinion, and the suffragists built on that. And in 1925, they got their right to vote.
So many stories to be told about the Great War and its impact. Thank you, Jenny, for giving us your insight into some of those stories.
Well, thank you. My pleasure.
It was my pleasure. I could have talked with her for ages.
Jenny's great. She was talking about the interwar period. Tomorrow on Here and Now, we'll take a look at just what happened to the regiment, the Royal Newfoundland Regiment, after the war, leading up to the Second World War. Now, obviously this week we're bringing you lots of stories behind some of the faces of the First World War, and there's a new art installation in Victoria Park in St. John's, and that showcases the bronzed faces of World War I descendants.
Now, among those faces is Dan Pottle. Here he is paying tribute to his great-uncle, Lance Corporal John Shywack.
My name is Danny Pottle, and this is my great-uncle, Lance Corporal John Shywack. Up until a few years ago, my great-uncle remained somewhat of a mystery to our family, immediate and extended family members. Uncle John, we always knew that he had served in the Great War. We did not know much about his years of service, and his early history. Anytime that we had asked questions of Uncle John, we were just simply told that he went to war and he never came back again. He died in the Battle of Cambrai. He was touted to be the best sniper in the British Army at the time. From what I can gather and the research that I've done, they were under fire, I believe, and it was believed that he was killed by a German shell. I think it's important for people to remember, because I believe most people, like myself, regard individuals like my Uncle John Shylock as one of the unsung heroes of the Great War, and their Indigenous participation in the service to Canada and to Newfoundland at the time certainly is not recognized. And I believe it's important that people remember the contributions of Indigenous individuals who worked to make this country free so that we all live in peace the way we do today.
Best part about living in Newfoundland is that someone is always up to something interesting. Like, I just find people, when they have spare time, they're creative. It's all about lifestyle in Newfoundland and Labrador. I love running because, strangely enough, it's very relaxing. If you're running anywhere in this province, you're probably running somewhere scenic. You're breathing in fresh air. I have a friend that says, on a good run, you can solve the problems of the world.
Mentioned earlier, very wet this morning, and it got much warmer today, but then there's some interesting stuff for tomorrow.
That's right. Yeah, we've got some more showers along the west coast, but into the evening hours, temperatures are going to drop. Could see some snow as well through the day. So if we take a look at that into the afternoon, mostly is going to be along the west coast and the higher elevations, but into the overnight hours is when we could see that push a little bit further inland. And then also for parts of central, we could see that by the time Friday morning rolls around, we could see that risk of flurries changing over to showers through the afternoon as that continues to track further east. But then a ridge of high pressure moves in and clears things out for the night on Saturday. So if we take a look at the forecast into Friday, we're looking at generally sun and cloud for the most part. Those temperatures pretty similar to what we are going to see tomorrow. It's about 5 degrees for Port aux Basques, 6 in St. John's. And again, the risk of either flurries or showers for parts of central, reaching a high near 5 degrees. Rain changing over to snow later on in the day, again, for parts of the west coast. Now, up through Labrador, things should taper to flurries through the day. Cartwright looking at just cloudy periods and 1 degree through the afternoon. But then looking ahead, here's that ridge of high pressure that I mentioned. In behind this system, another one. So we're going to see that move in through the day on Saturday. Those winds are going to pick up, start as snow, as I mentioned, change over to rain again, and then the winds are going to be strong again. Into Saturday afternoon, that snow is going to continue to push in through Labrador. It's going to be pretty quick moving for the most part as far as that rain goes on Sunday. So if you are going to take part in any of the activities through the day, it does look like things will clear out, but it will stay quite windy. So we're going to look, gusts could see 70 to 80 kilometer per hour wind gusts through the afternoon. And the system doesn't really move fast as far as those winds go. So in behind that, those winds are going to stay quite strong on Monday, and with that chance of flurries. And then taking a look again, another ridge of high pressure, and then another system. So it looks like a 1, 2, 3 punch as we head towards the weekend. So taking a look quickly at the outlook for Friday, or rather on Sunday, those temperatures are going to climb up. So we're going to see another temperatures in the double digits, 11 degrees. Again, that rain in the morning, and then we should see the sun peek out through the afternoon. Windy conditions expected. Now for western Newfoundland, it's going to stay quite gray for the most part, and breezy conditions down to about 3 degrees on Sunday. And then same thing for central, but warmer at 9 degrees, but those windy conditions will continue. Now, all that snow is going to move in for Labrador. It is going to happen Saturday night into Sunday. Somewhere between 10 to 30 centimeters is a good bet again. And then we'll see the same thing for eastern Labrador. Those temperatures aren't really moving much, sitting between 0 and 2 degrees over the next 5 days. So when I come back, I will have your weather photo.
Thanks, Ashley. A 747 cargo plane skidded off the runway in Halifax this morning, sending 4 of the crew to hospital with minor injuries. It happened as the plane was coming in from Chicago. Authorities at the international airport closed the runway where the accident happened, causing several delays. Hours later, the plane was still sitting far off the runway with damage to the nose and the underside visible. 2 of the engines also appeared to be damaged. There's no word yet on what caused the accident.
Moving south of the border now to the midterm elections. It was a night for the history books. A polarized United States elected more women from more diverse backgrounds than ever before.
They can play that game, but we can play it better because we have a thing called the United States Senate, and a lot of very questionable things were done between leaks of classified information and many other elements that should not have taken place.
I'm not quite sure if that's exactly what we meant to run right there, but back to the results. A record number of women ran in this election and won seats in Congress. Among those, 1/3 who ran for the House of Representatives were non-white. And other notable firsts, Kansas and New Mexico are both sending prominent Indigenous women to Congress. Texas elected 2 Latina Democrats, and 2 Democrats became the first Muslim women in Congress. And the youngest person ever elected to Congress is a 29-year-old female Democrat from New York.
Well, do you recognize that area?
Buena Vista?
Yeah, you nailed it. Good job.
It's so lovely there.
It is so beautiful. I can't wait to make it there. It's a gorgeous shot there. I will have the details on who sent us that photo coming up in a little bit.
right, we saw a gorgeous picture, which I identified.
Yeah, pretty fast there, Debbie.
I'm impressed.
I was just inhaling and
Yeah.
then...
Buena Vista. Quick, Buena Vista.
Well, I was asked, so I wasn't going to wait for you to...
No, you've been waiting a while.
That's true.
That was beautiful.
Yeah, beautiful shot there with the reflections in the water. That was what he pointed out there. So in Buena Vista, obviously, as we just mentioned. Thank you, Mark Gray, for sending that photo in. Like I said before, I can't wait to get out there and...
Oh, you're going to love it.
Yeah.
I had the pleasure of getting out there this summer and walking around in all that area. And of course, I had my grandmother and my mother grew up in the Port Union area, not far from Buena Vista. And so I spent many a summer out in Buena Vista.
It's a great spot.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you do go, actually make sure to bring a coat this time of year. It's
a little chilly.
Always windier there, I find, whenever I go to Buena Vista.
Not in that picture, but
no.
yes, lots of
No,
wind.
the reflections clearly were visible.
Yeah. And of course, Buena Vista has got a resurgence underway.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of nice shops and everything.
Great architecture. You can go shopping there.
And there you go.
Pretty
She
good
likes
food.
to shop.
I can now.
Anyway, that's our program. We'll be back here and lots more programming for you then. Hope you have a great night, everyone.
Good night.
See you tomorrow.